I wanted to ask about BRICS and about BRICS Plus because you'd mentioned it in in your interview with Geopolitics and Empire, and you sort of mentioned it and then went on from it, and I was kind of hoping that you'd be able to like break down like what BRICS is and what they're attempting to do in a challenge to the sort of hegemony of the petrodollar basically, and the sort of US
Yes.
driven financial system.
Yes. Well, okay, so I'll say this in case people don't know. BRICS is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and then South Africa. So they were the last of the five to join. And when I moved to Africa in 2005, that's when the BRICS was starting. I believe it was in 2006, and it was in the General Assembly of the United Nations where they set it up. So I got some numbers for you just to be prepared. 40% of the world lives in the BRIC countries. And so BRICS Plus has more countries: Bangladesh, Egypt, United Arab Emirates, and maybe a few more. So the BRICS are growing. I thought there were 40 countries in BRICS Plus. I was trying to find a list for you. So it's essentially, and this is what I learned when I lived in Africa for 11 years. I was like, Africa is getting richer. And then I would fly back to Canada once a year and I'd be like, I saw Canada getting poorer. And I thought Africa's lifting itself up. They're becoming middle class. This is where the growth is. And the highest growth and the fastest growing countries are in Africa, 8 of them. And so we won't have the same growth in the Western countries because most of our population is aging and they're retired, right? We just can't keep up. We'll never be as fast. So what's forming now, I think China and Russia being the leaders of BRICS and BRICS Plus, I got some information yesterday saying that they have actually dropped a new payment system now. So this will compete with, say, like SWIFT, and how payments are processed, how money is cleared. So same like your restaurant bill of 75 pounds, just as much as, $25 million commodity shipment of grain. So the clearing and the processing of payments is where the big power is. And it looks like BRICS Plus, through China and one of the development banks, has launched a competitor to the Western system. So this will be the big change over the next 5 years. It's like if somebody's having a party and across the street somebody else is having another party, who's going to get all the guests, right? And the truth is most people live in the developing world now, and the BRICS, the group, they call it South-South. We used to call it North-South trade. Now they just talk South-South, and they just want to trade with each other. So China, India, Asia, Brazil, Russia. I mean, these are hundreds of millions of people. There's 200 million people in Brazil. They don't need Canada. They don't need France or England. They have each other. And they all want cars and they all want jobs and they all want running shoes or solar power, whatever they want, right?
Mm.
So that's essentially the BRICS. There's a couple more things. I was going to put my glasses on. I wrote down for you. There's a guy that people might want to follow. He is the Chinese foreign minister, and his name is Wang Yi. So he's going to be the one who's probably designing the architecture of this new financial system. And that their currency, the renminbi yuan, will replace the US dollar as the dollar, that the currency that backs commodity trade and all these big money systems. It just has to be. It's the way it's going. And all these countries, the BRICS countries in South, they're just tired of being bullied and they're tired of being pushed around. And so if we need cheap labor and if we need more poor countries to support what's going on in the world, that's probably going to be us now. We're going to be the cheap labor, right? Because China's obviously, the economy is changing, but I don't know if that's enough information that answers what you're looking for. BRICS Plus apparently also, they do 23% of all GDP in the world, so that's about a quarter of it, and that seems a bit low actually, since there's so many of them. But remember, these are upward trajectory trends, so it's only going to get more and more, and some of these economies are doubling.
Yeah, yeah, they've got a lot of growth left to come. Um,
And a lot of young people, right? Let's say 70% of the population of countries like Africa are under the age of 30.
yeah, yeah, they got a lot of growth to come in the next sort of 2 decades, and it's because I was speaking to someone. Actually, the interview will be out before this one, so I was speaking to a guy called Bob Moriarty who believes that who was basically telling me that he thinks that Russia and China are planning a new currency that will be backed by something other than just, like not a
Yeah,
fiat
I've
style
heard that.
currency.
Backed
And
by gold, maybe.
yeah, since they've been
Yeah.
buying up a lot of gold, both Russia and China. And I've just found this thing that I was just pulling up for people while you were talking. That the Eurasian Economic Union, or that's like Armenia, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Russia, and also includes Iran, Serbia, Vietnam, and other nations. Are yeah, basically they're going to be working together with BRICS, in order to make one united payment system for all of those countries. So like this is very
Well, and that's
much.
what I heard has just dropped, is the
Mhm.
payment system is actually working now. I tried to find the name. I can't find the name. And Britain has been testing a similar, they're all changing, right? They're all kind of adapting. And I went into a Barclays about 6 months ago and came across the very first interbank machine they were testing, and they asked me to test it. And this was new. And so this is a new system that Britain is using as well to be able to move money between banks, and the digitization of the money. Um, what I came across about the new system, what was it? That the new currency will be, yeah, what was it? I think backed by gold. And some of the biggest commodity orders now are using gold. So who was it? Was it China the other day or somebody? They backed an order with gold. They didn't use, yeah, what was it? They didn't have enough foreign currency. They didn't have enough American currency. So they used gold. And it was a big energy purchase or a commodities purchase. So it's already happening, right? And you think, it's kind of surprised me that it's actually taken this long, that all these countries allowed themselves to be kind of pushed around by Western countries for so many decades. And
Mm,
everybody just accepted the system. Oh, that's the way it is. And if you don't like it, we're going to send our armies over.
mm. So, in that interview I watched, you sort of talked about the central bank system and why you think why it's like so important, or both important and secretive, in
Yeah.
the way that the world runs. So, do you think that like what we're seeing here is like a, because the central bank system, like you said, there's like, I don't know, like 180 central banks or something. Is this like a split that we're witnessing in how like central banks of the world want to run the global economy?
I don't see it that way, but in terms of who sets policy, maybe that different countries would want different policy. So, the central bank system of everybody being on the system, it's like you and I being TV producers or filmmakers. We have our own language, and you and I talk about software and sound and lighting, and we know that most people aren't going to understand, so we don't even bother including them in the conversation. Our moms do this when we start talking with other moms about our children. We just let everybody else not listen who don't have kids, because we're like, they don't understand. So I think that the part of the central banker society, they've gotten so used to thinking that the average person won't understand their concepts. They speak a whole other language. And a lot of what they're doing is caretaking the financial systems of the world. And that's a good thing, right? They're making sure that the trust in money is a big part of central bank systems. And I didn't really appreciate that until I started doing this research, that if people lose trust in the financial system, then we're all screwed, because you have to trust money and
Mm,
banks. But I think the biggest challenge to the system has been crypto.
mm.
And you've probably been following the very high profile death of like three or four crypto billionaires in the last
What the
week.
fuck is going on?
Yeah, and Christiane Lagarde, who used to run IMF, who now runs ECB, she talked about that quite a bit. She said it's this whole crypto thing is very, it has to be controlled, and we're very nervous about it because, like I said, it's like the party thing. What happens if the person across the street starts throwing a better party, and you lose all your customers, and suddenly you got a whole bunch of beer there that's not going to be drunk, because everybody's going to the party across the street. So there must be power and control in all of this. And I think that the hydra of the whole system must be the Bank of International Settlements. This seems to be the company or the shareholders that photocopy all the money. And it's just ludicrous when you think about it. We give this power to these people just to photocopy all this new money, and then they lend it to us and we pay interest to them. And they're just making it out of thin air. It's comical when you think about it. So we have to have a central, I believe in a good central bank system that's trustworthy, but the piece that all these countries should really be taking back is that their central banks serve their sovereign citizens. So until the 80s, the Canadian central bank did not charge interest on loans to governments inside our country. That was a big part of their policy. You could get interest-free loans to develop Canada. That's all gone, and that's not good. So now we pay loans to foreigners. That's like ridiculous, right? It's the first time, I think, in 90 years that the Bank of Canada has not generated profit this year.
Wow.
So what's going
Even
on
through
with that?
even through COVID.
Yeah, so maybe it was 2021 that they didn't do profit because we're just,
Okay.
or no,
Yeah.
2022. I don't know when their fiscal year is, but the very first year, because they do make profit on handling the money. The government of Canada pays the Bank of Canada to run the system, and this is the first year that they've lost money. And so the governor is in big trouble. He's in hot water, and he's being interviewed quite a bit now. And everyone's like, well, why didn't you stop this 3 years ago? And he's saying things like, well, this fiscal, the spending really should have been reined in. I'm like, isn't that your job? People like you and I don't know this kind of stuff. They do, right? You can see how they would just, okay, a little bit more, okay, another couple billion, okay, another 50 billion or whatever. So that's what I hope a lot of very simple lay person people start digging into, is things like, how do the central banks work? Because they do affect our lives hugely.
Mm. Hey everyone, thanks for making it right the way to the end of the podcast. I love that you tuned in this long. Do me a favor, hit subscribe, because 80% of you bastards are not subscribing, but you're watching my videos. See you next time.